I moved into my apartment about 8 months ago, and for the first few weeks, everything was completely normal. I'm a pretty private person, so I didn't go out of my way to meet people in the building. I waved at people in the hallway, said hello in the elevator, that kind of thing. Nothing more than that. The building itself is an older, converted house, split into 4 units. I'm on the second floor. It's the kind of place with thin walls and old pipes that groan when someone runs water 2 floors down. I didn't mind. It had character, and the rent was good for the area. About 3 weeks in, I ran into my downstairs neighbor, an older woman named Carol, in the mailroom. We got to talking, and somewhere in the conversation, she mentioned how nice it was that I'd finally have some company on my floor again. I told her I lived alone. She laughed and said she didn't mean a roommate. She meant Daniel. I had no idea who Daniel was. Carol explained that Daniel lived in the unit next to mine, on the other side of the wall from my bedroom. She said he'd lived there for years, kept to himself, but was friendly enough if you caught him in the hallway. I told her I'd never seen anyone go in or out of that unit. She just shrugged and said that sounded about right. He didn't get out much. I didn't think much of it. I figured he worked nights or just wasn't around when I was. Building's small, but it's not like I track everyone's schedule. About a week later, I mentioned Daniel to another neighbor, a guy named Pete who lived across the hall. I asked if he knew him. Pete's face did this weird thing, like he was trying to remember something he hadn't thought about in a long time. He said, "Yeah, Daniel, quiet guy, kept odd hours. Said he used to leave his trash out front sometimes, but he hadn't seen him in a while." That's when I started noticing things. At night, usually around 1 or 2 a.m., I'd hear movement on the other side of my bedroom wall. Not loud, just shifting, like someone adjusting in a chair or pacing slowly. I told myself it was Daniel. People keep weird hours. I didn't think it was strange enough to investigate. What did start to bother me was that I never saw him. Not once. Not in the hallway, not in the mailroom, not on the stairs. I started paying attention to his door whenever I left for work in the morning. It never had shoes outside it, no mail building up, no light under the gap at the bottom. Nothing. I asked the building manager about him directly. She checked something on her computer and told me that unit had been vacant for almost 2 years. No one named Daniel was on the lease, current or past. I told her that didn't make sense. 2 separate neighbors had mentioned him to me by name. She just gave me a tired look and said people remember things wrong sometimes, especially in an old building like this. I let it go because I didn't know what else to do with that information. The noises didn't stop. If anything, they got more specific. I started hearing what sounded like a low voice, just barely audible through the wall, like someone talking to themselves in another room. I'd press my ear to the wall, and the second I did, it would stop completely. Every single time. One night, I woke up to a sound I can only describe as scratching, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere behind my headboard. I sat up immediately and turned on the lamp. The scratching stopped the instant the light clicked on. I sat there for almost 20 minutes before I worked up the nerve to move the bed away from the wall. There was nothing there. Just the wall, old paint, a small water stain near the baseboard. But when I pressed my hand against the plaster, right around where the sound had been coming from, it felt warm. Not hot, just warmer than the rest of the wall around. Just warmer than the rest of the wall around it. I didn't sleep much after that. A few days later, I brought it up to Carol again, mostly hoping she'd have some explanation that would let me stop thinking about it. Instead, she got quiet and asked if Daniel had been talking to me. I said no, just sounds. She told me that was probably for the best and changed the subject before I could ask what she meant. I started doing some digging on my own. I found an old listing for my unit from about 3 years back, before I moved in. In the photos, there was a small access panel in the closet, the kind you'd use to get to plumbing or wiring. I checked my closet. The panel was painted over, like it had been sealed shut on purpose, but you could still see the outline if you looked closely. I don't know why I did it, but I pried it open with a screwdriver. Behind it wasn't insulation or pipes like I expected. It was a narrow gap, just wide enough for a person to crouch in, running along what I assumed was the shared wall with the vacant unit next door. There were things back there. A folded blanket, gone gray with dust. A few cans, empty, stacked neatly in a row. And carved into the wood stud closest to the opening, over and over, in shaky, uneven letters, was a single name. Daniel. I called the police that night, more out of fear than anything rational. 2 officers came out, looked at the space, and told me it looked like evidence that someone had been squatting in the wall cavity at some point, possibly accessing it from the vacant unit next door. They said it didn't look recent. The dust, the way the blanket had degraded, all suggested it had been undisturbed for a long time. I asked if that meant whoever it was gone. One of the officers paused before answering and said it was hard to say for certain with a space like that, but based on what they could see, there was no sign of current activity. I didn't feel reassured. I still don't. I had the panel resealed properly, this time with screws I checked myself every week. I started sleeping with a fan on, loud enough to cover any sound from that wall. For the most part, it's been quiet since. Almost quiet. 2 nights ago, I woke up at 2 a.m. for no reason I could identify. The fan was running, same as always, but underneath it, faint, just barely cutting through, I heard 3 slow knocks. Not from the wall behind my headboard this time. From inside my closet.